So what the heck is up with this whole idea of clipping curves and corners when it comes to sewing anyway? So when it comes to modern sewing, most of the time we sew things right sides together, that's the pretty sides touching each other, and then turn it inside out. So then all of the pretty sides are outside and all of the seam allowances here are on the inside. However, when we do this, you see all this fabric? All this fabric is going to get shoved into this very tiny space. And when we have a corner, that means that that corner will not be a corner because there's just too much stuff in there to let it be a corner. So because of that, we cut away this fabric at the corner on a diagonal so that there is less fabric that is going to be shoved into that corner, which means now when it gets folded in and folded in, you see that sits a lot nicer. Now, when it comes to an inside corner just such as this, I need to turn these seam allowances up, but you'll see they can't get turned up because this is smaller than what this outside space is going to be, which means if I turn this inside out, it's not going to have those points because it can't. There's going to be a whole bunch of weird tugging at the fabric. So when I see inside corners like this, I have to cut into that seam allowance so that this seam allowance can spread apart, and then when it comes out to the outside, you see now it can sit nice and flat. When I do this though, I have to be careful not to accidentally cut the stitching, otherwise I'm going to get a hole in my finished item, which is why I like having a smaller pair of scissors in order to be able to better control that cut. Now, the same idea also applies to curves. When I try to shove this curve, because this outside curve is smaller than this inside area, when I try to shove this curve into here, it won't let anything lie flat because this is too small in comparison to what's in here. It has to be able to spread out. So on a concave curve like this, I also have to do a similar thing where I have to clip into the curve. Now, the more extreme this curve is, the more I will have to clip, though I'll have to do more frequent clips. If it's a very gentle curve, I just have a few clips here and there. And you see this, when it gets folded in, will allow the fabric, the seam allowance, to spread out so that this curve will be able to lay nice and flat. A similar thing happens on convex curves, but instead of clipping out a snip, I have to clip out a little triangle to take out that extra fabric. Like that, which means when it goes inside, you see that snip that I took out of it lets it sit flat. Alternatively, you can also use a pair of pinking shears to trim this entire seam allowance smaller, and the V's along the shears will allow that curve to do whatever it needs to do, as well as the smaller seam allowance means there's not as much of a difference between this outside measurement and this inside area where it's going to sit. And now you know!